I heard some cats. If you can hear me, clap once. I saw somebody do that recently and it worked, and so I haven't tried it yet. If you can hear me, clap twice. Yay! Great, awesome, thank you. Just a couple updates. Hope lunch was great and you are re-energized and your tummy's full from lunch, ready for some K action. There's some of these most forms in the green up there on the resource table. Feel free, do your thing, take your bio breaks as you need, take care of yourself. We'll get some more water up here, coffee, tea, and we're going to do another book giveaway. And I want you to know if you are one of the winners of the book giveaway that Kay is available to sign your book. If you are not a winner of the book giveaway, you are still a winner because you can purchase one of Kay's books, and she can also autograph that as well. So let's do a book giveaway. 890, yay! Okay, awesome, and we'll have one more book giveaway at the very end after Kay's presentation. So you can go ahead and take it away, Kay.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody doing? I always get this time slot where you want to go to sleep after lunch, so I'm going to try to keep you awake. So I'm going to do a little bit of introduction about myself. So I'm Kay Adams, and I don't know why I've waited so long to come to Steamboat. I've lived in Denver for 1997, and I've never been here till yesterday, and I have to leave today, but I've got to come back. It's so beautiful in this area, so thanks for having me. By training, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've been a medical social worker for about 25 years, so I'm getting up there in my years of experience. And I have my own business called Compassion Works, and I'm a dementia coach and educator. And I am particularly passionate about dementia of all the different illnesses. I was a hospice social worker for 8.5 years in Denver, and all of the people that my team helped take care of in hospice lived in nursing homes, assisted livings, or memory care. So aside from my two grandparents, I'd never been around anybody with dementia until I worked in hospice. And I was in these different facilities or care communities 40 hours a week for 8.5 years. So I was sort of immersed in the land of dementia there. And then you guys know what Kaiser is, Kaiser Permanente? So then I worked for Kaiser Permanente for 8.5 years. I was a therapist for 4 of those years. And then I worked in a diagnostic memory clinic for 4.5 years. So we were the specialty team in Kaiser where people who were having memory problems or cognitive changes got sent for testing, and we do the diagnosis part. So I did that for another 4.5 years. So I was up more on the front, a little bit more of the front end of the dementia world. And then the last 1.5 years that I worked in Kaiser, I was a home-based dementia specialist in the palliative care department. So then I was driving all over Metro Denver. If you've been there, you know it's not fun driving around in the traffic. But visiting people living with dementia in their own homes, doing education, helping people with advanced directives and all of that kind of stuff. Did you have? Oh, okay. Does it need to be closer? Is that better? Okay. Sorry about that. Is that better? Okay. So my last job, I was a palliative care social worker, and I did a lot of education. I helped people with advanced directives that were living with dementia and their families. It was kind of a dream job, but what was tugging at my heart was that families never let go of my card. There were thousands of Kaiser members who needed my services, and there was only one of me. And it killed me. It just killed me, because they kept calling, can't you come to do another home visit? Can't you come do another clinic visit? Can't you call me back on the phone because I'm struggling? And I couldn't do it. And I couldn't live with it. So I jumped ship in the fall of 2018 and said I'm going to start my own business, not knowing that a pandemic was around the corner. So I started my own business called Compassion Works in 2019. And I had to pivot like everybody else in COVID. So now mostly what I do is two main things. I am a dementia coach. So I work with people in about 35 states right now, 2 countries. Dementia knows no borders. So I work with individual care partners, family members, friends, families of 8 on a call, all trying to figure out what do we do with mom or dad or our sister or spouse or partner, whoever. So I work with people all over the place and try to be the light in the darkness, try to help support and educate, give strategies, resources, that kind of thing. And then I do a lot of education, both virtually and in person. I would urge you guys to get on my mailing list over here because I have grant sponsorship in Denver, so I do a lot of classes every month that are free to the public on Zoom. So please get on my email list and you'll know about those. So of all the different illnesses that I've worked with as a clinical social worker, dementia has captured my heart because I'm going to cuss right out loud. It's a shit show. It's really hard. It's challenging on so many levels. It's very expensive. It's very long. It changes relationships, right? It's really something that most people don't understand what's going to happen as it unfolds over time. And so I try to support people on that journey. So that's what we're going to talk about today is there's no need to go alone, but guess what? Most people I work with go alone. How many of you are mostly caregiving by yourself for the most part, right? And that's the norm, most often than not, that I see. So hopefully I might, for those of you who are going it alone, maybe by the end of this you might think about asking for some help, okay? So let's get into this today. So I'd love people just to call out. I would just love to know, you're not being judged or graded. When I say, what is dementia, what comes to mind? What's dementia? Memory loss. Cognitive failure. Isolation. Abnormal brain change. Personality change. Aphasia, so language gets affected, right? Hearing loss, okay? The silent treatment, what does that mean? They just don't talk. Communication changes, right? Anything else? Crazy behavior. Changes in personality, changes in mood. Loss of self. Executive functioning changes, can't figure out how to do tasks anymore. So I do a class every month if you sign up for my email list. It's called More Than Memory, Understanding Brain Change and Dementia from the Inside Out. And it's 90 minutes, and I go through all these. Part of this is an abbreviated part of that class today, but it's really helpful for understanding what goes on in the brain and how it translates into somebody's behavior. Okay, it's really helpful for us to have a little bit more compassion when we know those things. So, of all the different diseases, when I talk about dementia, I feel like you guys are an educated crowd here, but for most people, most of the time they say memory loss or they say Alzheimer's. Those are the two answers I get the most when I say what is dementia. So dementia is a chronic and persistent disorder, meaning it goes on over time, right? And it's caused by one or two things. It's either caused by an injury to the brain, like closed head injury, you fall off a ladder, car accident, multiple concussions that catch up with you later, that kind of stuff, or it's caused by a disease in the brain, okay, inside the brain. So it's caused by an event. Unfortunately, we're getting a stereotype right now because it's so prevalent that we think it's part of aging, like a normal part of aging, but it actually isn't. It's just that we're living so long that we're seeing it. It was an epidemic before we had a pandemic, for sure. So it's really just a term that's used to describe a group of symptoms that might be affecting somebody's memory, or it might be more about their thinking, cognitive changes, or social abilities. Their social governor that says what's right or wrong to do in a social situation, those kinds of things. So it's not just one specific disease, which is why there's so much confusion about it. Do any of you guys know who Teepa Snow is? Okay, leading dementia educator. So I was trained under her extensively as a consultant and a trainer, and I worked for her for a while. And this is a thing that she developed called the umbrella of dementia, just as a way to simplify getting our arms around what does this disease mean. Well, when I was trained by her, back in 2016, at that time we thought there were about 120 different kinds of dementias. I was just at an event a month ago where a neurologist said there's over 400, so I don't know. But we aren't going to know all those. These are the ones that are most prevalent. I'm going to go quickly through these today. But under the umbrella of dementia, the ones we hear about most often is Alzheimer's, which we're going to talk about, vascular dementia, which we'll talk about, which is usually stroke-related, Lewy body dementia, which is super common, but most people don't know what it is. Frontotemporal dementia is another one. And what I find interesting is that when we talk about something like cancer, somehow we all implicitly know if we're talking about somebody has brain cancer or prostate cancer, ovarian cancer, kidney cancer, we all know it's cancer, right? It's all under the umbrella of cancer. For whatever reason, that's super easy for us to understand. But then when we switch back to dementia, we go, oh, they have Alzheimer's, but thank God they don't have dementia. Or they have dementia, or thank God they don't have Alzheimer's. We do this either or when they're all under the same family. So sometimes I say, pretend you're walking into a 31 Flavors ice cream store, okay? All different flavors, all ice cream. So they're all related. Does that make sense? It's not an either or. They're all in the family of a dementia. And we're going to talk about some of those family members more specifically. So with Alzheimer's disease, we hear about this one the most. And it's a degenerative brain disease. It's the most common cause. It's the 7th leading cause of death for 65 and older. Some years it's the 5th leading cause, some years it's the 8th leading cause. But in the US, 7th leading cause of death. So most people could say, yes, Alzheimer's has something to do with memory, usually short-term memory, right? They ask you the same questions, tell you the same stories, all that kind of thing. But most people don't realize it affects problem solving, mood, personality, executive functioning skills, and eventually people's ability to be independent because those day-to-day skills, they can't manage them by themselves anymore. So this is because nerve cells or neurons in the brain involved in cognitive function have been destroyed, or they atrophy and get destroyed. And we talked about brain changes in the first workshop today. But if you come to my More Than Memory, you'll learn a whole lot about this, more than you'll learn in this one. Just for those of you who like numbers, what is your guess? Right now, what number of people age 65 and older in the US are living with just one form of dementia, one form of dementia under the umbrella Alzheimer's type? Do you think it's 2.3 million, 4.5, 7.1, or 10.1? What? 7.1, I hear? 10.1? 7.1. Here's your toaster. 7.1, just one of 300 or however many kinds of dementias we have. 7.1 million. Okay, here's another try. By 2050, 25 years from now, what is that number, 7.1, projected to be? 13.8, 10 million, 15 million, or 9? I heard 13.8. Any others? 15, okay. 13.8 again, another toaster. Okay, one more for you here. In the US, more than what number of people age 65 or older are now living with Alzheimer's type of dementia? Just Alzheimer's type. 1 of 9 people age 65 or older, 3 out of 20, 5 out of 30, or none of the above? I hear 1 out of 9. 3 out of 20. You didn't get the toaster this time. 1 out of 9. So I spend a lot of time at events with older adults. And sometimes if I'm at an event with 300 people, I start doing this 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Because it's so prevalent. It really was an epidemic before we had a pandemic. And it's only getting worse. So with Alzheimer's in particular, 1 of every 3 people 65 and older in our country dies from Alzheimer's or a related kind of dementia of the 300 other kinds, okay? 1 of 3. It kills more than people with breast cancer and prostate cancer, combined, which is a lot. And by 2031, which is right around the corner, we're gonna need at least 1 million additional healthcare workers just to care for people living with this one particular disease. 1 million more healthcare workers. And this is the part that motivates me for my job as a dementia coach and educator supporting families, is nearly 20% of spousal caregivers die before their loved ones with the disease. And usually that's because they're doing it alone. Usually because they're just riding the range by themselves out there and struggling just to make it through the next hour or the next day, and they don't have a lot of support, and I want to change that if I can. All right, so we're going to talk about some of the main types of umbrella or dementias under that umbrella. The first one being vascular. Anybody know anybody with vascular dementia? Your mom? Okay, a couple here, 3. All right, so usually with vascular dementia, this could be a big game changer. It can happen most of the time as a result of a stroke, is what we hear about most often. So if I had a stroke today, depending on where in my brain that stroke hit and how severe it was, I may or may not have a dementia. I may have mild problems, or I may have significant, like I may be in a wheelchair, not able to communicate, have aphasia, be completely dependent until my death, however many years later, okay? So, was your hand up? You still can't hear me? Oh, I have to stand really close, okay. So what happens with the vascular dementia is it causes problems with reasoning, planning, judgment, memory, and it really depends on how much that blood flow got interrupted or damaged on the way to the brain, okay? So it can develop after arteries in your brain are blocked. So like I have a number of clients that I've worked with who have vascular dementia, and some of them, it's more like a nuisance. Like they keep misplacing their keys. They keep, forgetting where they parked in the parking lot or things like that. But by and large, they're getting by. Then I have other people I worked with that went from being completely normal to having a major stroke and now cannot communicate, are incontinent of bowel and bladder, are unable to communicate to anybody on any level, can't feed themselves, can't dress themselves, the whole kit and caboodle, right? So strokes can be really big game changers for folks, depending on where they hit. So confusion and memory problems, trouble paying attention, organizing thoughts, problem solving gets really difficult, deciding what to do next. So people will be like, what do I do now? What do I do now? What do I do now? Looking to you to give them the answer constantly. Restlessness and agitation, and depending if where the stroke hit, it could be an unsteady gait. And then the unsteady gaits, as we learned about this morning too, is like leads to falls, right? And falls lead to more problems. So falls are a big deal in the world of dementia and leading to more issues. Depression or apathy, if your whole life has changed or significantly changed as a result of this medical event, people get really depressed, and they get apathetic, meaning I just don't care. The things that used to light me up and excite me just don't do that anymore. And that's a really hard symptom as a care partner to put up with, because you're like, wait, the grandkids are here. You always like seeing the grandkids, and they're just like, nah, I'm going to go take a nap, right? And you're like, what's going on with my person? So another kind that we hear about a lot, but most people are real confused about, is Lewy body dementia. What you're seeing on the slide there is a Lewy body in the brain. And it's actually the second most common type of progressive dementia, but most people have never heard of it. And it's these protein deposits called Lewy bodies that develop in nerves in the brain. And those nerves are involved in thinking, memory, and motor control, right? Moving our bodies. And it causes a progressive decline in mental abilities. So people with Lewy body dementia may experience visual hallucinations. In fact, this is one of the very first symptoms that we usually see. And for whatever reason, I don't know why this is, oftentimes those visual hallucinations come in the form of seeing people or seeing animals, or both. So they might say, you can't sit on the couch, the kids are there. And you think, there's no kids there, right? Or you can't go into that room because, the horses are in there. Like, you're going to have to get a snack later. Yeah. He has a herd of kangaroos. That is a new one. I haven't heard that one. Okay. Stay tuned, right? Yes. Yeah, so a lot of people who have Parkinson's disease in the later stages, it ends up turning into a Lewy body dementia. It's very common, not always, but it's very common. So anyway, there's a lot of these hallucinations that happen with people, and they can be visual or they can be auditory. They're hearing things that aren't there. They're hearing people calling them. It could be tactile. They feel like someone's touching them. Or it could be sense of smell. They smell fire, so they're yelling, fire, fire, get out of the room, when there's no fire, right? So it can present in different ways. So it can affect like the Parkinsonian kind of things with the rigid movements. And again, the falls. Robin Williams, I think, really put this disease on the map in our country. We did not know as a population that he had been diagnosed, with Parkinson's before his death. He and his wife knew that, but on autopsy, they found out that he had Lewy body dementia. And when his wife, Susan, was interviewed and stuff after Robin's death, she talked about how he was in a different room when he took his life. He was in a bedroom across the hall. And she said the reason he was sleeping over there is because he was thrashing around in his sleep all the time and kicking her and punching her and those kinds of things. And you'll see that was a symptom, but they never knew that he had this disease. So visual hallucinations, movement disorders, poor regulation, let me go back to that, of body. So people their autonomic nervous system doesn't work right. Their blood pressure gets off, their pulse, sweating, even their digestive process can be impacted by this. So other symptoms, cognitive problems, confusion, attention, visual, spatial. They don't know where they are in space related to things. When you're talking about, I love the tape on the stairs. They can't judge how far the curb is, how far that stair is. If they have a glass of water and they're going to set it down, they may not judge how far this is and it crashes on the ground, right? Those kinds of things. They just don't know where they are. Sleep difficulties. So when people are thrashing around that REM sleep disorder, physically acting out. So one of my key questions I used to interview families about in the memory clinic is, are you still sleeping in the same room as your partner? And if not, why is that? Because often it was this symptom, and that's how that helped us with the diagnosis. Depression, apathy, fluctuating attention. So I call all dementias kind of a roller coaster, but Lewy body takes the cake on the roller coaster ride, because some days your person may be fully almost normal, talking to you like normal, functioning like normal, and you start thinking to yourself, those damn doctors are a bunch of quacks. They got the diagnosis wrong, you know, he or she is back, right? Just like they used to be. And what happens? Your hopes get up, right? Your hopes get up, and then the next hour, the next day, the next 3 days, week later, they're out in orbit. They're out in Mars. They don't make any sense. They can't figure out the first step of what to do that they were executing just fine 4 days ago, right? So it's this mass, and then you're like heartbroken all over again. So of the care partners that I support around this disease, it's no joke in terms of the grief with this roller coaster ride that happens. How do they diagnose? This gets missed for years, oftentimes. This one gets missed for years, and it's only like 2 or 3 years into it that it comes out. You know, Lewy body and frontotemporal really get misdiagnosed a lot. You got to get all those pieces together at the right time in front of the right person. So frontotemporal is another one, and it's a group of uncommon brain disorders that primarily affect right here, the frontal lobes of the brain and the temporal lobes. We have 2 temporal lobes. And these areas are associated with personality, behavior, and language. You guys talked about that this morning. Especially the left temporal lobe is where most of us store our language abilities. So when you had mentioned hearing loss, actually dementia does not cause hearing loss. What dementia does cause is comprehension changes. So does anybody in this room speak a language other than English? Could you say, what is your native language? Spanish. Could you just say a few sentences to me in Spanish that doesn't include taco or burrito, because I know those? Say a few sentences to me in Spanish, and I'm paying attention to what you're saying. Okay, that's good. Okay, I'm fascinated by what you're saying, and I have no idea. Okay? So it's not because that I'm not hearing you, I can't comprehend what you're saying. If you take my More Than Memory class, you'll learn a lot about the damage that gets done to the left temporal lobes in this disease. So I'm hearing what you're saying, I'm interested and engaged, but I don't know. It's just like you're talking Russian. It makes no sense, it's not computing. So that happens a lot with people. And this one gets misdiagnosed a lot because guess what? So whereas Alzheimer's, with the people that get impacted by Alzheimer's, it's 2/3 women to 1/3 men. We're not exactly sure why that is. We're trying to learn more about that. But with this disease, it tends to strike more men than women, and it tends to strike younger. So between the ages of 40 and 65. So I guarantee you, if a 50-year-old man is starting to have some odd personality changes or behavior changes or things like that, and they go to the doctor, is the doctor going to think about dementia first, or what else might that doctor be thinking? Drinking? Yeah, what else? What? Depression? Drugs, right? Something else. They are not going, oh, I bet Fred has frontotemporal dementia. That is not what they're thinking. So sometimes this gets missed 5-7 years to get a proper diagnosis for this. It's really sad. I've had couples that have divorced by the time it's diagnosed, or people have lost their jobs for sexually harassing coworkers or things that they never did before the dementia because of the changes in the brain. So, yeah, so a lot of cognitive testing, and also, I think, this is my bias, okay, from working in the memory clinic, you also have to get collateral data, I think, from family and people that are close to the person. Because people can show up okay on a cognitive test, but be doing outrageous things. You know, child porn sites. I mean, all kinds of stuff they never, ever in a million years would have done, right? That they're not going to disclose in that evaluation. So I think having other people in on it. So again, portions of the lobe shrink or atrophy, and depending on where it hits, that changes the person. So one guy came into our memory clinic when I worked there, and I interviewed him for a few minutes, but then his daughter primarily. And so he was a church organist in Denver, very prim and proper, always dressed in his suit and tie and all that stuff. And he lived by himself in a high-rise apartment complex in Denver. And his daughter lived across town, and she started getting phone calls from the neighbors saying, your dad, they like had trash chutes at the end of the hallway where you could drop your trash. And he was waddling down there in his underwear and his socks. And she's like, no way, my dad would never do that, right? And turns out he had frontotemporal dementia when he went through it. Another daughter that I interviewed in the memory clinic had moved her mom from California to Denver. And so she hadn't been around her mom for about 5 years, and her mom was living with her. And they went to a restaurant, and her mom said, I got to go to the bathroom. And so she just left and went across, to the bathroom. And on her way back, her daughter sees that she just sits down at a table with an African-American guy she doesn't know. And she just gets in a conversation with him. And when she finally comes back to their table, she said, Mom, what were you talking to that gentleman about? And she said, well, I was telling him, I coming here from California, black people are okay, but I can't stand those Hispanics. And she was like, oh my God, Mom, what are you, like the social filter completely gone. I mean, you can get shot for things, really, I mean, it's just like you don't know right from wrong, right? It's really devastating sometimes. So with this one, the other thing that can happen is really inappropriate social behavior, like people will do and say things. So you and I all think things, right? We think things like someone cuts us off in traffic, we think, God damn it, I want to just slam my car into you. But if our frontal lobe is intact, we go, car insurance, cops, bad idea, right? All those kinds of things. But if we don't have that intact, who knows what we might do? The other thing that's really difficult for families is the loss of empathy, judgment, and inhibition. So you might just be bending over backwards as a care partner. You have quit your job. You're doing everything to care for your loved one. And they're like, why are you so crabby all the time? What's wrong with you? Why are you so tired? Right? You don't do anything. So, they don't have that cognitive skill of putting themselves in your shoes anymore. And you get pissed, right? You're like, I am sacrificing my life over here. And then apathy. So apathy is different than depression because apathy is just when you have no zest for life anymore. So for me, like things I love live music, I love traveling, I love my son, I love Colorado, I love dogs, and if you bring those things around me when I have an apathy, I won't give a shit. I won't. I'll just be like, I'll ignore them. Or you say, you just won the lottery, you just won $10 million. Oh well, pass the salt. Okay? That's different than depression that's treatable. Apathy is a really challenging symptom in a lot of different kinds of dementias. And then for some people with FTD, they do a lot of irritating behaviors, like clapping all the time, tapping all the time, and you're like, would you stop already? And they can't seem to make themselves stop. So that can create a lot of tension for folks. A couple other symptoms here. Overeating or a preference for sweets and carbs. Now, I like sweets and carbs too, but sometimes they, at the exclusion of everything else, they'll only eat chocolate chip cookies and potato chips for every meal. And maybe they used to love salads and whatever, but they won't eat that. Or they try to eat things that aren't even edible. Speech and language problems. Speech can get obliterated when the left temporal lobe gets affected. So some people have a really hard time understanding any spoken or written language. And Bruce Willis kind of put this one on the map for us a few years ago when he and his family came out about his type of dementia. It's called primary progressive aphasia, or PPA, and it is a form of frontotemporal dementia, and he has almost no language whatsoever, period. So another one that we're hearing more about is called CTE, or chronic traumatic encephalopathy. This is particularly found in people who have played college or pro football, or who have been boxers, or who have been soccer players, multiple concussions to the head, right? And that's why the concussion protocols are such a serious thing, starting with little ones, because you could have these multiple concussions to the head, and then fast forward 10 or 20 years, and now you have dementia from that brain getting jiggled so many times. And the problem with this one in particular is it can cause a lot of aggression as a symptom. And let's say you got a guy that's 6'8" and 380 pounds with this type of dementia who's aggressive. And what if you can't handle them at home anymore? Who's going to take them in the community? It becomes a real problem, right? Because it's scary. All right, so one of the things that comes with dementia is that, at least, this is a Teepa Snow quote, at least 50% of people who are diagnosed, even in the early stages of a dementia, have no clue that anything has changed. And I'm going to talk about how that's different than denial. They have no clue, okay? But of the 50% of people that do have a clue, they tend to get anxious. They tend to get angry. They tend to think that their brain has been hijacked. You know, and they know something's wrong, but they don't know what it is. They feel like they're going crazy. So there's a word for that. It's a Greek word called anosognosia. And that means having no knowledge of the disease. It's an actual term, having no knowledge of the disease. So I'll give you my classic example of the difference between anosognosia and denial, okay? So let's say I found a lump in my breast, and I go into the doctor, and I said, I'm concerned about this. And they do some testing, and they're like, yeah, I think we need to do a workup, right? And then when they do the workup, and they do x-rays and everything, and then they're like, you know what, Kay, we think it's cancer. We think we need to have a mastectomy. We think you need to do chemo and radiation. And they give me all these printouts and say, you know, call so-and-so, and let's get this going, right? This treatment plan going. And I leave that doctor's office, and I come home, and I shove that paperwork in the back of a drawer, and I don't tell my family, and I don't tell my friends, and I stick that information in the back of my brain because I don't want to think about it, okay? That's denial. In order to deny something, you first have to acknowledge it at least a little on some level. Does that make sense? Anosognosia is no matter what you do, you could videotape me doing something crazy, and I'm going to swear that that videotape was altered in some way. That wasn't really me. That's technology, okay? It's a cognitive skill they have lost. And so this is the crux of my coaching business a lot, because families are trying to keep you safe, and you're like, what the hell are you doing? I don't need you. You're my daughter, not my boss. You're my wife, not my, right? I'm just fine, and you know they aren't, right? And here that's what happens a lot. So dementia has a profound impact on relationships, a profound impact that I would argue a lot of other diseases don't. When my own dad was dying of cancer, he was still dad. You know, he still knew who we were. He was still able to joke with us like he'd always done, and we could relate the same. But it's not the same with the progressive dementia, right? Because people can't show up for us the way they've always shown up with all of these brain changes. So it does have a big impact. And this is some of the emotions that come up, especially for the care partners I work with, when these relationship changes happen, is guilt and remorse. Why might you feel guilt or remorse? Anybody feel guilt or remorse in here? Yeah, why? Getting angry. Yes, getting angry, losing your temper. I just told you that. Don't ask me that one more damn time. It's only 10 a.m., right? I've had it, right? That guilt and remorse, because you're not a robot. You just can't, we're not wired just to do that all day long endlessly, right? Sadness, grief, depression. Why might that be? You've lost your friend. Even then, they're still here, right? Lost that relationship. You've lost that connection the way it used to be. And so I tell people all the time, this is a grief issue from start to finish. But as a society, this is my prejudice from working in hospice and palliative care, I think we're brainwashed in our culture to think that we only grieve after something happens, after a death, after a divorce, after our last child moves out. But our brains aren't wired like that, and our hearts certainly aren't. We grieve all the way along, okay? And that's an important thing I work with people around, too, is we got to grieve those losses along the way. And then anger. Why might anger come into the picture? Frustration. Over? Yeah. Can't make them do what they should be doing, right? Right. This is not what I signed up for with retirement. Absolutely. You know, I got shorted somewhere, right? Why me? Why my family? Why my loved one? Other difficult, and I'm a big dog lover, by the way. That's why I have all these dog slides. Look at this. I love this one. Overwhelmed. My dog is overwhelmed. I left him with a new dog sitter, and these look like the pictures of him I'm getting right now from my phone. So overwhelmed. How many of you feel overwhelmed on a regular basis? Yeah, because guess what? It's a moving target, right? It's a disease that keeps going forward, encroaching, changing all the time. And so you're overwhelmed because there's no playbook. No two people go through these the same. There's over 300 or 400 different kinds of dementias. So it's overwhelming. Ooh, here's a hot one. Let me see if anybody's honest in this room. Resentment. Why does resentment come up? You don't deserve it? Shouldn't be me. I shouldn't be me having to do this, right? Why else? I didn't sign up to be the caregiver for my brother. You have to play the bad guy. Anybody have any other relatives that could help but don't? Yeah, right? And you're like, it's usually one person that gets, in that position, and it's usually the daughter, statistically, right? And there could be 6 other sisters, right? Or granddaughter, right? Young, 26-year-old granddaughter that's doing it, right? So there's a lot of that. And then fear and loneliness. Tell me about that. What's going to happen? What's my future, their future going to hold? What else? What if they might fall? Which can change everything, right? Yeah. Right. So how do you sleep at night if you're worried that the person is going to die during the night all the time? Not well. How about the loneliness? Social isolation. So we learned that social isolation in COVID kills, just like heart disease and lung disease and alcoholism, because people died at a way more accelerated rate. Because we're wired for community. We're wired to need each other, right? I will tell you, of all the different kinds of caregivers I've worked with in hospice and palliative care, et cetera, there's not a more isolated group of people on the planet that I've met than dementia care partners. Because your world becomes so small. I can't take a 5-minute shower. I don't know what they might do, right? And so when you hear me preach about building a care community, that's why I do that, is because I don't want you in that position. So anticipatory grief is the emotional pain and sadness that arises far in advance of death. And a lot of times people don't even realize you're grieving, right? And other people will say to you, well, why are you so sad? Your brother's still alive. And you're like, but it's not my brother. Like I knew my brother, right? Or it's not my wife or my partner or my sister or whoever. It's that anticipatory grief, like I'm losing them a chunk at a time. And how long? How can I survive this? How long is this going to go on? That anticipatory grief is big. And then this other one, if you've never heard of ambiguous loss, this was a term coined by a psychologist named Pauline Boss, and it applies to a lot of different things, but particularly with dementia, your person is still here, they might be sitting right next to you on the couch, but they aren't the same mother, father, brother, sister, partner, whatever, grandparent. They are in their own bubble, they are in their own world. Sometimes we can penetrate it, but most times we can't, depending on the stage of dementia that they're in. And so we're lonely. I was on a coaching call with a guy who's been married 64 years to his wife last week, and he was like, I'm married, but I'm not. I feel like a third party in my home. If my wife talks to anybody, she talks to herself. And this is my day. How long do I have to do this? And that's, we don't know, right? It's very hard. So this ambiguous loss, and I use this example a lot too, because I think it's important. So let's say that you live on a block and there's 10 houses on the block, okay? And every house, somebody, at least one person, is caregiving for somebody else, all right? But let's say in 9 of the 10 of those homes, they're all caring for someone without a dementia. But you are in the house that has somebody with dementia in it. Guess what? Those other 9 people want to give you advice. Well-meaning advice that falls flat. Because they don't understand that you can't take a 5-minute shower. They don't understand that your family member might not recognize you. They don't understand that you've lost your best friend, right? They don't understand the emotional pain and anguish you're in. When they say, but my mom died last year, you should be happy you still have your mom. And you're like, come live in my shoes for 24 hours and tell me if I should be happy, right? So you got to find your tribe. You got to find people that understand the shoes you're walking in, because those other people, well-meaning as they may be, can't always support you. Does that make sense, folks? Okay. So what we know about dementia is that it can change everything. Our brains control everything, so dementia has the potential of changing everything. It's not something that a person can control, but it's deceiving, because some days they can do things and some days they can't, right? And what do we think? Be honest. Okay, if yesterday, our spouse could load the dishwasher just perfectly, and now today we ask them to load it and they just stand there and stare, what's our first thought? Manipulative, thank you. Lazy. They just want to get out of the work. They just want me to do everything. It's an automatic response, guys. It is. Because how could you do it yesterday and not today? It's these brain changes that happen, but we automatically go to the negative, right? Lazy, manipulative, whatever it is. But that's really not. It's like they can't help it. They're doing the best they can with the brains they have, and so are you. So it's not the same for every person. So even if you knew 20 people who were 70 with Alzheimer's, you know 20 people, individuals with Alzheimer's. No two people go through the path the same of any dementia. And it's not a mental illness, but it's still a stigma, unfortunately. And what's for damn sure is it's very real and it's very hard. And people need support. So I want you at your tables. If you could do a pairing up, if we could get people, and Cece, if you guys could help me just make sure people are in pairs, if there's an odd number at a table. I'm just going to give you a couple minutes apiece, so we don't want a lengthy discussion, but I want you to share with a partner, and I'll time it and tell you to switch, okay? Just a couple minutes each. How has dementia or another life-threatening illness changed your relationship with your person? So as soon as everybody finds a partner, I'm going to set a timer. Okay, so find a partner. I'm going to give you guys, everybody hear me still? Can everybody hear me still? Okay. It's going to be a brief one. I'm going to ask you 2 minutes each, okay? Right? 2 minutes, and then I'm going to tell you to switch partners. All right, so your time is starting right now. Have about 30 seconds before we'll trade partners. Okay. Try to wrap that up. I know that you could talk for the next 2 hours instead of 2 minutes. But I want you then the partner that didn't get to talk, I would like you to switch to the other partner and have them share the same question you guys just went over. All right, I'm going to start the 2-minute timer again. Here we go. Got about 30 seconds left. Okay, if we can try to wrap that up. Try to come to a close on that one. This is when we would need some microphones, Cece. Yeah. What? Oh, clap once. Everybody hear that? Yay! Okay, so I'm going to have people just raise your hand. Would like to hear from people. We're going to have the microphone go around, and I just love somebody to share at your table or in your dyad what you came up with, what you heard. I'm sure there's a lot of themes that are the same when it comes to the relationship changes. Let's hear from some people. Who's brave? Who's going to go? Wait a minute. Microphone's coming.
It seems like the common theme is the loss of a partner, friendship, and with that comes kind of social isolation. And a burden, yes.
Loss of a partner, friendship, social isolation, and burden. Yeah, thank you very much. Right back there in the black sweater, hand was up.
I'm sure it's nothing profound, but just, we stepped into the shoes of caregiving.
Right, and when you didn't maybe choose to, right? And it changes everything, right? What else? There was a lot of chatter out there. I know you guys were sharing. Other relationship changes. Or how has caring for someone with a serious illness changed your relationships? So role reversal with your mom. And what did your mom have?
She had vascular.
Vascular dementia. So that was a challenge because you didn't want to become her mom. Yeah. Right. Thank you. Those role reversals are tough. How else did it change your relationships? Caregiving. Even relationship with yourself. Relationship with other people. Any comments there? Was it what you expected?
We didn't talk about it, but for me, it was, I've watched my husband sort of, his male friends have kind of moved away. And there's only a couple that are, close enough to him to maintain that relationship now. So I think there's a loss of his friends in his world.
Yeah, and that's hard to watch.
He gets drawn into, he goes out with me with the girls,
Right. Is there any resentment that ever comes up from those friends?
Oh, yeah. Well, for resentment from my friends?
Well,
No.
that you didn't know, that they don't show up for your husband in the same way.
I understand it. I think it's a difference sometimes the way men relate to each other versus the way women do.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Anybody else? Okay, one more over here.
On that note, it's hard to see friends not show up for for my mom, and or be uncomfortable when they are around, like not knowing how to. Oh, this is taking so long to walk this way, or what, like treating her like a delicate vase. What does she eat? We'll ask her. Or, things that are just so uncomfortable.
Yeah, because this is my own prejudice, but living in a death-denying culture, we'd rather talk about Botox or wrinkle-free, whatever it is, than the fact that we're all going to die, we're all aging, and we don't know how to do this. And I will say, as myself as an example, so I had an undergrad degree in psychology, I had a master's degree in social work, I had worked for probably, 20 years in different counseling roles. But before I went to hospice, I never had a single class in death and dying. I never sat bedside with people that were dying. It was like 10 PhDs, that job, And what? We don't talk about it, yeah. And so I don't judge people now that don't know how to show up because we don't teach them. right? We don't teach them. That should be a whole class just like you guys taught about, how to move someone safely to how to move someone's heart, how to be with someone else, how to companion someone else. I will be ever grateful for 8.5 years in hospice for that training, because no one can take that from me, but it's one more job for us as the caregivers to train our people, our friends, how to show up, right? And we shouldn't have to, I'm sorry. Was there anybody else? Yeah, one more hand over here.
I think the hard thing for me was sometimes I feel that people look at him, they see his friends see him a certain way. They don't see what I go through, but they think, oh, he's fine, he's fine. And I had looked it up, and they called it show timers, because he'll talk about the weather or whatever it is that he's comfortable with, so they don't see anything that, like, maybe a little bit, but not like what I go through every day,
So social chit-chat is something that remains latent to the disease, but you can't dig down and drill down under that, and they can't talk about anything. But one of my pet peeves in life is like we talk about how is so-and-so with whatever disease, but my focus is, how are you? How are you? You guys are my heroes, and I am not kidding. You read my book, you'll know I mean that. Caregivers are my biggest heroes, especially care partners for dementia. It's really, really a unique kind of grief and challenge. And sometimes we're not good at asking other people, hey, what about me? Can you ask about me once in a while? Because I'm here too in this equation, and I'm impacted also. Because like Teepa Snow says, if one person is living with dementia in their brain, everybody around them is living with dementia, right? Anybody else before I move on? Okay, so thank you for that, everybody. It's all about perspective. And so what we see depends not only on what we look at, but what angle are we looking from, right? Are we looking up? Are we looking down? Are our eyes shut? It's all about perspective. And even though my dad didn't have dementia, he was one of my greatest teachers about perspective, because there's a story about this in my book. But I had only been in hospice 6 weeks. I had come from youth corrections. Kids, everything short of murder kids that I'd worked with for 10 years, really hardcore kids. And I found myself in hospice 6 months later, zero training or anything like that. And 6 weeks, I was overwhelmed, completely, utterly overwhelmed. Besides my grandparents, I'd never seen anybody die, had no idea what I was doing. I'd never been a medical social worker, totally over my head. And 6 weeks in, my dad's diagnosed with terminal cancer and dies 6 months later. And I've said this forever since then, is that I would have gladly read 100 books about death and dying and grief than to lose my dad, right? I fell completely, utterly apart. Anticipatory grief was not a concept I knew before. I was like a howling wolf on the clump on the floor, bawling my eyes out. He lost 80 pounds in 6 months. I gained 30. I was filling the hole before he ever left the planet, right? And so, but the thing is that it was so hard. I can't even tell you how hard it was in the context of being a new social worker in hospice, and then losing my dad at the same time and all of these things. But now, he died back in 2002. But to this day, I think he's my greatest teacher, because guess what? If I hadn't lost my dad so early on in that job, I wouldn't have had my heart opened the way it was. Now, I don't know what anybody else's grief is like, but I sure have a lot better idea after losing someone I love so much, how physical grief is, how emotional, how psychologically it affects us, how spiritually it affects us. It's a profound emotion. I think love and grief are the strongest emotions. That's my opinion, not science. But so to this day, because of the perspective, I am grateful. I am grateful that I had that lesson early on, that I learned to companion people who are dying and to support their families because of my own firsthand experience with my dad. And my mom just died in December, and she had dementia, and she had supportive hospice too, so I got to be a recipient, again of that. But one of the things now with perspective, I can say, when my dad died, he knew who all of us were. He didn't have a dementia. He slept 20 hours a day. He was so weak and that kind of stuff, but he knew us all. Now, I didn't think it was a gift to lose my dad when he was only 73. I didn't think I was lucky and I'd won some sort of the lotto. But I now know from working so much with dementia that I did. It was kind of a gift, because he knew us and could relate to us as he always had, and that is not the case, really, with dementia, especially because it changes people's ability to communicate with us in the way they used to communicate. So we're going to move into just a section here about helpful tools to communicate with people with brain change and dementia. And you guys mentioned some things today and the physical things, so this is going to be complementary to what you said. But one of them is to match your pace to theirs. So oftentimes, because people's brains can't process information as quickly, they don't get the words out as quickly, right? They can't say. So we need to slow our roll. We need to slow our pace. We need to, like you were talking about, using visual cues, fewer words, simpler concepts, that kind of stuff. And checking back for understanding. Because what happens, one of the things I talk about in my More Than Memory class is this. So in an early stage of a dementia, people miss at least one of every 4 words we say. At least one of 4. So if you guys know this, don't give it away. But I'm going to give you a simple phrase. I'm going to drop every 4th word and see if anybody can guess it, okay? All right. Unless someone cares a whole awful, nothing's going to get it's not. Come on, guys. Here we go. I'll try again, a little louder. This is what we do to people, don't we? All right. Unless someone cares a whole awful, nothing's going to get it's not. Yeah? Get better, it's not. Your own, good job. Dr. Seuss from the Lorax, okay? But that's one of every 4 words. That's early stage because of changes in the temporal lobe, okay? So as they get into that middle stage, which can last 7 years, 10 years, they are not getting most of what we say. They are not losing their hearing because of it, losing their comprehension. Can't speak to us the way they can. They can't read anymore. They can't make sense of a TV show or the plot. I've done it a lot. Thank you. And sometimes I don't get it right. Still, I just filled in the word. Wasn't supposed to do that. Okay, so trying to match their pace, check for understanding. Okay, honey, what was it? Can you tell me from your perspective what I just said? And you'll see the holes when you do that. You know, they'll get this much of what you just said. And then practice using longer pauses. Ooh. Pausing, and then you could do some deep breathing while you're doing that pausing. Some prayer. Oh my God, give me strength to get through this, right? Yeah. Rhythmic speech. So one of the things we know that's retained later in the right temporal lobe is music, prayer, rhythm, music. So have you guys ever seen Alive Inside, that movie? So people who cannot talk, who cannot do anything, can sing, belt out every words of songs from their 20s or teens or early 20s, because it's the right temporal lobe that holds that stuff, not the left, where we lose it. So you can use that to work with. Other things is just reflective listening. So PLWD stands for person living with dementia. Word finding problems. I can't come up, what is the, right? Can't get the word. So rather than trying to fill it in for them automatically or something like that, just, repeat back to them what they've already said. And maybe they can get a thread and come up with it. And continue, or maybe they can't, and it's charades, right? You might be trying to help them guess. So if they say, I'm looking for something to, over here you want to jump in, don't you? You do not want to sit there in that silence. You want to fix that problem, you want to jump in. But it's practicing patience. We get a lot of opportunity. So you're looking for something, and see if they can fill in the blank. You're looking for something, do you know what it's for, right? And try, because you want them to succeed when they can, right? You want to set them up for success if possible. And this is a good phrase to use. Is it this, whatever you think they might be looking for, or is it something else? At least they can go something else, and then you're on the next wild goose chase about what that something else might be. But you're just trying to give them a line so you can kind of pull them into the shore so they can try to figure out what they're trying to say to you as best they can. This is a great phrase, tell me more about it. Well, it's the thing you put in a thing to make it go. It's the thing you put, a key? Yes, right? It could be a key. It could be something else, but right? So another thing is tell me more about it, right? Tell me more about, so they might be able to give you some other language that you can work with to try to get at it. So there's a term called, I can't ever say this, circumlocution. Did I say it right? Yeah. I have a hard time with that one. So they talk around it. Like a while back, last summer, I remember I was going to, do some weeding around the perimeter of the lawn, and I could not think of the name of the tool to save me, and I was asking my son. I said, it's the thing that you do the weeds by the driveway with. It's the thing that and he's like, the weed whacker? Yeah, okay? That's what I'm talking about. We talk around it. We can't come up with that damn word that's floating right in front of us, so we make a big loop around, right? And sometimes we have to help close that loop for them. That's a good technique. Visual cues, super important. So if I was sitting at a table with my person and I want them to drink, maybe I take a sip first, and I point to their glass of water, right? Point to mine, do it. I don't have to say a word. Likely, they will follow suit, right? Or like this. What does that mean? Come with me, right? Or, right? So there's visual cues we can do, but what we tend to do is we use way too many words. And when those language centers of the brain get affected, those words don't work. So just like you guys were saying earlier, the fewer words, the more visual cues you can give, and the simpler gestures and waiting for that to process in their brain, you're going to have better luck. But what we do a lot is we talk a lot. And so this is, especially women, we do this tangential thing. So it might be, what is your name? Linda? So I might say, oh, Linda, do you know, this evening, do you want to go for a walk? Or, you know what, I've heard that the hot springs here are really beautiful. Maybe you'd rather do that. Or would you want to get dinner before we did that? Or maybe not do either of those two things, right? That's what we do. We just jump around all over the place. And maybe you answer yes. I don't know which question I asked you, right? Because you're probably still processing the first one. So that's, again, really hard for our brains because we talk to everybody else like that except the person with dementia. It's hard to switch gears all the time. Really hard to switch gears, and it's draining. Most care partners I work with do not wake up with a full tank of emotional gas, right? We feel a little bit depleted even at the beginning of the day. So we talked about this earlier. Use simple language, short, simple sentences and words, like as if you were talking to a child, but not disrespectfully, but just so that they have a better chance at understanding. Don't use a bunch of jargon or complex concepts with them. And if they don't understand what you're saying, try to rephrase it or try to use different words yourself, because maybe that will hit. Maybe that'll fire in their brain a different word. Yeah? Okay, how do you ask? So how do you deal with the same questions over and over? Answer them. Well, it depends on the question. Sometimes you can do something with a calendar, like point. Here's that, you just asked me when we're going to lunch. Right here, it says noon. There's the clock. It's really more about trying to calm your own nervous system with that because they can't help it. Because the hippocampus just gets annihilated in this disease. And so they ask the same questions repetitively. So you can try little visual cues to have or things to point to, or you have it right there in front of you on that piece of paper, that they can, oh yeah, I forgot, I looked at that. You told me, it's right here, right? Go ahead. Well, I don't know if you can't get mad, because everybody I work with does. But what you guys spoke to this too, and I love it. I work with people not about not getting mad, because we cannot always help it. Anger is an emotion we were given as human beings, right? But we can work towards responding instead of reacting, and we can work towards self-compassion instead of beating ourselves up. Because we can't always show up well. I mean, I thought of myself as a person with a really long fuse until I became a parent. Then I'm like, I am not waiting one more minute. Would you get out of that bathroom? We're going to be late to school, right? Those kind, and like, God, who is that woman, right? That kind of thing. Okay. And then, asking them yes or no questions, not really, complicated questions. And then sometimes just giving two choices, like a meal. Would you rather have the fish or the steak or whatever, instead of taking them out to a restaurant and there's 25 items to pick from and they're overwhelmed and they don't know. So sometimes just helping, would you rather have this or that, right? Can be a helpful thing. Other things is with the nonverbal communication, like you guys were saying, their visual fields change. So you want to make sure, sometimes it's not great to stand right in front of them because it can feel threatening, but just slightly to the side can be helpful so that they can see you in their visual field that tends to be right in here, not peripheral so much. Making eye contact, that nonverbal communication goes a long way. Watching our body language, do we feel threatening? Do we, how if they're upset or something. And the thing about with folks with dementia is that they can pick up on those nonverbals a lot and tone of voice, but they may not know why. They may have just, tried to make coffee to be nice and put laundry detergent in the coffee maker instead of coffee. And now there's suds all over the floor, and the caregiver's like, what the hell? I told you not to, right? And they know you're mad, but they have no idea why, and they certainly don't know it's connected to their behavior, right? So it's hard. And then using gentle touch, holding hands. The shoulder's a really nice place. People, as a calming thing, just a little bit of pressure on the shoulder, those kinds of things. I'm here, but I'm not, I feel safe with you on my shoulder when I'm trying to walk with this gait belt. It makes me feel comfortable. I'm kind of feel held like that. And then the environment. So a lot of times families will be like, oh, Mom has always loved our big family gatherings for Christmas, and now she never wants to be in the room. Well, guess what? If you're getting one of every 2 words I say, not one of every 4, and it's noisy and there's all these different conversations, people can't hang in there for that. They just cannot do it. So what do? They disappear. They get agitated. They scream, shut up! I can't take it. So we need to have smaller groups or dyads or not so many people at one time, and we might have to change some traditions, which is another grief issue for people. Does that make sense? But having those big crowds of people become overwhelming for folks that can't follow along with what's happening. And then patience, we talked about that earlier, right? Patience and understanding. Teep Snow likes to say, well, because of all the mistakes that happen with dementia, we get lots of practice as caregivers, right? And sometimes we're really like saints in our ability to be patient, and sometimes we aren't. My mom had dementia for the last 5 years of her life, and I love her madly, but oh my God, I lost it any number of times with her. And if anybody should know better, it should be me. I'm supposed to be an expert in this, and I fell into the daughter role, not the expert role. Mom, you're being ridiculous. Oh my God, you're not being rational. Stop it, right? Lectured, guilty as anybody else because I'm human, right? I'm not a robot. Avoid interrupting, talking over them, or rushing them, because what happens if you get rushed, your brain doesn't work as well, and we want to help work with the brain they have. If they become frustrated or agitated, try to validate their feelings. So what I hear a lot people do is like, if Linda's really frustrated by something and you're agitated and you're like, I want to go home, right? You're in a memory care or something. And I say, oh, would you like a cookie? I've never met a Linda that says, oh yes, just instantly. If she's escalated super high, I think about it like customer service. You're in line for customer service, you're really pissed off that whatever you got didn't work and the person's just on their phone, like the 12-year-old employee playing on their phone, they're not giving you any attention. You're not going away till this is solved, right? So it might be like, oh, you want to go home? Oh, well, tell me about your home. Where are you from again? Was it Tennessee? Where were you from? And wasn't there a favorite food you liked to eat back then? Or I remember you were telling me a story. So we're talking about home, right? We're talking about home, maybe getting her on a subject about that, something that's bothering her because she has a need, like a homing pigeon to go home, and there's something's not right, right? So we're talking about that. As we're talking about that, maybe we can say, gosh, can you smell those fresh break, cookies in the kitchen? Maybe we could just walk down there, right? So you're validating something first and not just like, does that make sense, guys? So that's a good way to do it. And then take a time out. This is my favorite intervention as a parent. I don't think I've timed my kid out 5 times in 15 and a half years of him being alive, but I've timed myself out hundreds, okay? Like, I am leaving the room, and don't you think about following me. I'll come back when I'm calm. Could be 5 minutes, could be an hour, not sure, right? Take a time out if you need a time out, and don't feel guilty when you do. And then accept blame. You were saying this perfectly this morning. I'm sorry, even if it's not your fault. I'm sorry this is so hard. I'm sorry you're struggling. I'm sorry I'm struggling too. Sorry this disease entered our lives. I'm sorry this isn't what the retirement we thought we were going to have, right? I'm sorry. And then using what you know about the person. Use their interests and preferences to guide conversations and activities. My dad didn't have dementia, but if he did, I would have just been talking about sports because he lived for sports, especially his college days of playing football for Nebraska, things like that. Gauge him in those kind of conversations, things he loves talking about. Encourage them to engage in activities, even if they're simple. So maybe they used to do a 1,000-piece puzzle, now they can do a 20-piece puzzle. But it's still a puzzle, it's still something that they can do. Maybe they used to be a great cook, but now you try to elicit their help to make Jell-O. Add the ingredient, pour the water in, stir, right? Still can enjoy it much simpler. And then focus what they can still do. Teepa Snow talks about the donut and the hole, if you've ever heard about this. So the hole represents everything that's changed, that the dementia has stolen away, right? Relationship changes, memory changes, cognitive changes, executive functioning changes, all of that, which we do need to grieve along the way. But what about the donut that's still left? What can we still celebrate about that, right? What can we still focus on and be grateful for? So that just leads me into ways that we can try to stay sane and maintain our own well-being as care partners. And most people I work with struggle in this department. We're good at taking care of everybody else, but not so much about ourselves. Okay, here got the dog slides, just warning you again. So one way to try to take care of ourselves is to tune out unproductive worrying. So we can just get spinning, about all of these things. So productive worries tend to lead to actions, whereas unproductive doesn't. It just leads to that vicious cycle. Well, what if this happens, and what if that happens? And we just spin in anxiety. And does anybody struggle with anxiety in here? Yeah, absolutely. And our brains don't work well when we're anxious, right? So we're trying not to take on more worry than we really need to. And then try to differentiate how much of your worrying is productive. Are you worrying about having enough food in the house, or staying up all night thinking about worst case scenarios? Oh my God, what if this happens? What if that happens? Well, if it's productive to think about food, you can go to the grocery store. That's a problem you can solve. But the unproductive just drains our energy, psychologically, emotionally, physically, spiritually, everything. And then practice mindfulness. Do you love this one? Practice mindfulness. And it can just be a minute. Like if you're just focusing on one thing, which is what mindfulness really is, and one thing only, you can't be spinning ahead. So anxiety is a disease of the future primarily, right? It's worrying about what if, or ruminating about the past. But if we can bring ourselves into the present moment, which is really hard with our brains as they are, but to practice this at 10-second increments at a time, maybe work up to 1 minute or work up to 2 minutes, it can calm us down. And deep breathing, in addition to this, can really help as caregivers. Some people I work with do the primal scream therapy. They step outside, they're in the rural area, and they're just screaming, "I can't take it!" for 5 minutes, and then they come back in and resume the caregiving, right? So you just have to practice, really, to stay grounded and try to do these things for your own health. Other things are developing habits and routines for better control. So creating habits and routines that give us some structure. Maybe just like, okay, I'm going to exercise 15 minutes 3 times a week, maybe. Maybe that's all I can fit in. Or I'm going to take a 2-minute morning meditation. I'm going to read one reading that I find inspirational to ground me for the day. Or make a coffee date with a friend. I deserve to get out of the house. I deserve to have a life too. And then set up an activity calendar. So if you don't have it on the calendar, at least in my life, it doesn't happen, right? And if I don't put myself toward first somewhere up there, it's never going to come to fruition. So we got to do that, because the burnout rate with caregivers is no joke, especially dementia care partners. High risk for anxiety, high risk for depression, substance abuse, and earlier death. So self-care is no joke. And I know that we talk about this all the time, but it's vitally important, vitally important. Don't you love this one? Oh my gosh, can't wait to see my dog tonight. So focusing on gratitude. Gratitude, my mom was one of the most gracious people on earth, and she didn't eat for the last 57 days of her life. I've never seen that in all my years of hospice. And she was the happiest person on earth. She was grateful for every single caregiver. She was grateful for every single person who visited. She was just like joyous if the sun was shining. She was joyous if it was raining. It didn't matter what. She was grateful for everything, And I've been really trying to pick up on that trail from her. I'm usually a glass half empty person, but I'm trying to be a glass overflowing person in honor of my mom's death. So just trying to focus on gratitude where you can. Guess what? God, I thought the morning was going to be much rougher than this. Woo! Isn't that great? High five, right? Focus on the things that you can be grateful for. I like this one. And seeking out humor. So this is how I survived COVID, as I watched Robin Williams reruns. I watched Carol Burnett reruns. I stayed up till 4 a.m. because what else was there to do? And this is a technique I use a lot, because I work with really stressed out people all over the country and outside of the country. and they're crying a lot on my calls, and they don't know what to do, and they're grieving, and they're overwhelmed. So to balance my own emotional state, I do lots of YouTube videos and things like that that make me laugh, because those feel-good endorphins, I'm going to back up a second. Here's some short-term benefits. It enhances our oxygen-rich air, stimulates our heart, lungs, and muscles, and increases feel-good endorphins that make us feel better, like it relieves pain. I mean, we've had comedians forever. It was the court jester or whatever. There's a reason we like to laugh, right? There's a reason. It helps fight stress and potentially more serious illnesses. Laughter may ease pain by causing the body to produce its own natural painkillers. So going out of your way to laugh and finding things that you find funny, and like I'm looking forward to next weekend because I have a friend that I've known two friends since 5th grade, and one of them, her name's Jenny, and she makes me laugh harder than anybody on the whole planet. And we're spending a girls' weekend together for two nights. And like I have to say, oh, Jenny, stop, my cheeks hurt. Like I'm begging her because I just laugh so hard. I feel like I've done 1,000 sit-ups. And I am just like pumped for the next week after that, right? Laughter really helps. And don't rely on temporary distractions. That could be food, that could be alcohol, that could be, for me lately, it's been Facebook Marketplace. Because I just moved and I'm trying to find cheap stuff and I'm constantly on Facebook Marketplace. But denial or avoidance is just not a good way to cope. But a lot of us go there, right? We get these temporary distractions. But what we really need is solid ground beneath our feet and others to support us. Well, I love this one too. Look at this. Accept what you can't control. How is this cat on my head? I don't know. So accept what you can't control. And what's happening is, like, if you have a person who has any dementia at this stage is a terminal illness. We don't have cures for any of them under that umbrella. And we can't change it. All we can hope to do is change our responses, change our abilities, right? Gain more knowledge, gain more support. Because we can't change the outcome. We can just try to change the path along the way as much as we can. But oftentimes when we feel out of control, we try to control even more, and that ends up backfiring on us. And then don't put all your eggs in one basket, which, when you guys did a show of hands earlier, most of your eggs are in one basket, meaning it's one person who's primarily responsible for someone with dementia. And in 25 years, I have not seen it happen yet in my firsthand experience, that one person could care for someone with a dementia to the end of their lives at home alone. I have not seen it. Unless they fell down the stairs, had some unexpected event, but if it just played out, because those middle stages and end stages, people are incontinent of bowel and bladder. They can't sit up, they can't walk, they can't talk, they can't feed themselves, they can't dress themselves, they can't roll over, And one person cannot do that for years on end. So you need to start thinking about getting support. I already talked about that one. So finding your tribe. So finding other people, and it doesn't have to be the most obvious, it doesn't have to just be friends, but doing a brainstorm list of who, it could be your hairdresser, it could be the clerk at the bank, it could be different people that you could invite in to help you with your person. And I am a big proponent of saying learning to ask for help is a strength and not a weakness, and I know that goes against how we're trained in our culture, but I had hospice patients teach me this, when they couldn't control anything else, but they could ask for help, and how invaluable that was. Yeah. I get it. Yeah, perfect. So your person might not be comfortable with people coming in to help. So, and I'm going to talk, can we table that just 1 second, because I'm going to get to that. You were looking at my slides up here ahead of time, weren't you? Okay, asking for strength, asking for help is a strength, not a weakness. So I'm just going to give you, no, let's just do it in the big group, because I don't think we have time to break out. So instead of why would it be a benefit, that's probably obvious. What has stopped you guys from asking for help? What are the barriers? Because people just have a hard time asking for help. Embarrassed because? So you want to protect their dignity. You don't want to expose your loved one because you want to protect them. Yeah, so if I ask for help and this person comes in, then they're going to see it, and I don't want that for them. Yeah. Assume they're too busy to help. Yep. Don't know what to ask. You're too overwhelmed. I don't have time to even think about what I need, right? What's other barriers to asking for help? Yeah. Cost if you have to hire people. Yep, for sure. The other people don't want complete strangers, or the person with dementia doesn't maybe operate well with that. Yep. How about good home training? Anybody else trained not to ask for help? Just do it yourself? Yeah, be independent. Especially if it's a spouse, right? I took the vows, through sickness and in health. I got to do it all by myself. Anything else that prevents us from asking for help? Yeah. Yes, perfect. I'm going to save it for later, but then you're so overwhelmed you never do get around to that, right? Uh-huh, yeah.
Never mind.
Are you sure?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so it's really important with this part because the asking for help, we're going to need it. Don't you love this one too? How did the monkey get on his back? Asking for and accepting help for the long haul. Really important. This disease, like the average length of time from diagnosis to death in Alzheimer's, it varies depending on which thing you read, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 to 11 years. So some people might live 1 or 2 years, some people might live 20. All right? And every dementia is different. Every person goes through it differently. But unlike my dad, who died in 6 months from diagnosis to death, now those 6 months were brutal, but it wasn't 6 years or 16 years, right? And so we do need to get over ourselves and learn how to ask for help. It's a strength. It's a muscle we can build. So one of the things I talk to families about is trying to build a care team. And so, and that could just be somebody to come in, and you invite them over for coffee, so it's the 3 of you, so that your person gets to know them a little bit. Like this is a friend or something. Let me get.
My biggest stumbling block to asking for help is having a diagnosis.
Oh, yeah. Yep. But don't let that stop you, because I work with all kinds of people that don't have a diagnosis, but the families are in the shit show. They're having a hard time. So you can explain. We've never have a formal diagnosis, but I'm sure they have cognitive changes and probably a dementia, and things are changing, and I need help. Yeah. So, you can identify different things that you need help for and different folks in your life. And these are, if you write these down or take pictures with your smartphone, these are 2 great websites, caringbridge.org and lotsofhelpinghands.org. And they're free, and they have calendar features. And let's say you identify 25 people in your life, and it could be the banker, it could be a cousin, it could be a neighbor, a former coworker, one of the kids or whatever. And people can sign up. You as the caregiver can brainstorm different tasks you need help with. So maybe your life's gotten so small you can't get outside to mow the lawn anymore, or it's hard to get to the grocery store. But you know what? Guess what? Somebody else might be able to go to the grocery store for you. Or someone else might be able to mow your lawn. Or ideally, things like respite, sitting with your person. But that takes warming them up, right? That takes practice. So the earlier they get used to meeting people, the less opposition you're going to have later. But if you just try 5 years into the disease to start bringing all these strangers in, it's harder because they don't adapt as well to all of those changes. But it can be just like, so I was training on this model when I worked in hospice. I did a lot of community education. And when our son Eli was born, I had all these people while, leading up to his birth saying, oh, if you need a babysitter, let me know. I wrote down their name. What's your phone number? If you ever need date night, let me know. I wrote it down, right? I'd be happy to bring you a meal. I wrote it down. And we had people bring us meals for 30 days. Not because either of us were incapable of fixing a meal, but because I said yes. Yes. I had 5 friends that gave us free babysitting for 7 years. I hired a babysitter twice, ever. Because what? Their grandkids lived out of state, or they never got to have kids, and they got to snuggle a baby. And it was a win-win situation, right? And Eli got to get to know we call it the rainbow family. He thought all these people were really his aunts and uncles all this time, and now he's like, Mom, I don't have all those relatives. They weren't really but that's what we called them, Aunt Leslie and Uncle Joe, and and they were friends. And so, and it wasn't always the obvious ones that felt good about helping. So you can identify these things, and you can use these websites for things. You can send out one email, it goes to 25 people at once. My person is having a hard day. You know, they're really confused today. They're kind of agitated today. Just want you to know, because if any of you are coming by this afternoon, you know, he may be acting a little different, right? So it is a great tool to use, but you as the care partner don't get to be in charge of it. You get to be in charge of brainstorming what goes on it, but get a young techie person in your world to run it, because you don't need one more job. But you do need to invite people in. I love this quote. Be strong enough to stand alone, smart enough to know when you need help, and brave enough to ask for it. Brave enough to ask for it. In this, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but in this past year, lost my marriage, moved twice, and lost my mom, all since May and December, okay? I cannot tell you how many people I've asked for help. I cannot tell you the depths of my despair or how hard it was, grieving all of those other losses. And if I hadn't practiced this particular muscle, I wouldn't be standing with you today, believe me. I wouldn't be up to it. I've had to ask so many people for help just to get through all this pain and all this grief, and now I'm on the other side of it, okay? Because I was willing to be vulnerable, and it wasn't easy. Sometimes I just called friends and bawled for an hour and a half, and they just stayed on the other end of the line, you know? But people will show up for us if we're vulnerable enough to ask, and we give them a little bit of a lead about what it is we might need. It really helps. And I try to lead by example, because none of you know me, but it's true. Like, I barely made it through this last year, but now I'm like, it fuels me even more. Like, please ask for help. Please get people to support you on this journey, because all of us are going to need it. We're all going to be caregivers or care receivers, unless we die suddenly. It's the statistic. So self-care is not a selfish act. Self-care is an act of self-preservation. Self-preservation. So again, when we talk about perspective, you know, what you see depends not only on what you look at, but also where you look from. Are we looking down, or are we looking up? Are we looking for the positives? Are we looking for the gratitude? Are we looking for the donut and not just the whole? Are we looking for where we could find help and support along the way? Are we looking to find moments of joy? And I'm going to leave you with this. I love this little saying. Dementia, and perhaps life itself, is best approached not by trying to change minds or challenging another person's reality, but by striving to understand a mind, to see it in context, to reckon with its contradictions, and to simply let that mind know that it is worth knowing. Dementia, and perhaps life itself, is best approached not by trying to change minds or challenging another person's reality, but by striving to understand a mind, to see it in context, to reckon with its contradictions, and to simply let that mind know that it's worth knowing. And this ending quote from Oprah Winfrey: "The smallest change in perspective can transform a life. What tiny attitude adjustment might just turn your world around?" So that's all I have for you today. I'd love it if you thought about a book. I'd love you to join my email list, and thank you guys so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Kay. Really, thank you for your vulnerability and for your wise words and education. Thank you. And thanks to all of you for being here today. Let's do one more book giveaway. And I have a 875. Yay. And thank you. And thanks again to Renita and Stacy, to Kay, thank you. And a few more things before I lose your attention. At the bottom of the agenda, you'll see a conference evaluation QR code if you want to fill it out online. We also have some hard copies on your table if you would prefer to do that. It really helps us plan future caregiver events. And yeah, let's one more round of applause for all of our presenters. Thank you so much.